So, for those of you who live in America or know about politics in general, you probably know that in the United States of America, race and racism have been hot button topics. And I'm here to give my 2 cents because since I'm black, you're not allowed to disagree with me. Now, the Supreme Court recently had to hear one argument about affirmative action, which is a policy that was basically designed to sort of curtail some institutional racism that was happening. That was basically where black people were getting into college at fewer rates than whites and other ethnicities, and people were obviously and understandably very upset about that. So affirmative action basically lowered the bar for African Americans, so that was easier for them to get into college, and that naturally did cause a trickle-down effect, right? More kids that are black get into college, get college educated, raise families, their kids go to college because their parents went to college, and so, as long as you're, pumping out kids at higher than replacement rate, then you're going to be raising the population of black people that are getting into college. And so now you see plenty of black people getting into college. Many don't even need to use affirmative action to get into college. But now affirmative action has been seen as something more controversial as of late because it's not something that's been used as much to get black people into college as it is something to keep people of other ethnicities from getting into college. And we've been seeing this happening. This case in particular was because Asians, especially, were being discriminated against because the colleges were saying, oh, there are too many people of this ethnicity going to college, which sounds extremely racist, right? It's a very racist thing to say that, oh, we've got too many Asians here. We can't let any more in. It's one of the most racist things that you could hear anyone say, especially when it comes to college admissions. It's about as racist as it can get. Now, the Supreme Court decided to strike down affirmative action. And this is huge. It's very massive. The byline here of this article from NBC News says, the ruling is a culmination of decades of effort to end the consideration of race in admissions. Now, on the face of it, this sounds like something that is very much not racist. This sounds like something that would, further get rid of racism in the United States of America, especially since it's far easier now for black people to get into college and they don't even need affirmative action in order to get there. However, not everybody feels the exact same way. And we've been seeing lots of criticism from especially the Democrat Party. Lots of people are disagreeing and condemning this decision. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, blasted this ruling. Joe Biden said that he strongly disagrees, and I think even went so far as to say that the Supreme Court is not normal. AOC criticized this. And then on the heels of this, Capitol Police actually had to evacuate the Capitol area for a short period of time because there was a suspicious package there. But they found out that all was fine and they opened everything back up. The Vice President, Kamala Harris, also said this was, quote, a step backwards for our nation. Now, is everything so terrible? Does this mean that black people will never get to college again? Are black people just completely unable to get into college without putting down the white man? Well, I frankly disagree. I especially think that now because we've seen a lot more equality in the nation, people aren't so racist against black people anymore, that we don't necessarily need, these sort of discriminatory, because they are frankly discriminatory. It is, and I know some of y'all's heads are going to explode, but this is like a reverse racism in order to, reverse some very real harmful effects of institutionalized racism that has occurred over the course of this country. While it's had good intentions, I'm quite sure, it is, at the end of the day, racist, and I am glad that the Supreme Court overturned this. And, I am not the only black person who feels this way, right? The great African-American thinker and scholar Thomas Sowell actually had some words to say about affirmative action. And here's what he had to say.
Who was it who said, "If the Negro cannot stand on his own legs, let him fall"? Ronald Reagan, Newt Gingrich, Charles Murray? Not even close. It was Frederick Douglass. This was part of a speech in which Douglass also said, "Everybody has asked the question, what shall we do with the Negro? I have had but one answer from the beginning. Do nothing with us. Your doing with us has already played the mischief with us."
Yo! Absolutely savage. Absolutely savage. That's entirely true. Right? It's entirely true.
Do nothing with us. Frederick Douglass had achieved a deeper understanding in the 19th century than any of the black leaders of today. Those whites who feel a need to do something with blacks and for blacks have been some of the most dangerous friends of blacks. Academia is the home of many such friends, which is why there are not only double standards of admissions to colleges, but also in some places double standards in grading. The late David Reisman called it affirmative grading.
Mm-hmm.
A professor.
There have actually recently been complaints at a college, I forget what college it is, where teachers were basically said that if you don't grade students based on race, then you're racist. And he kind of got in trouble for saying, no, it should be meritocratic. And, you know, that's become a whole thing. I would not be shocked if that also ended up at the feet of the Supreme Court, because that professor who was arguing for more a meritocracy when it came to grading rather than being racist when it came to deciding who gets an A, who gets a B, who gets a C, who gets an F, he ended up getting fired. So I would not be shocked to see that case go to the Supreme Court as well.
Sir, at one of California's state universities, where black students are allowed to graduate on the basis of easier standards, put it bluntly, "We are just lying to these black students when we give them degrees." That lie is particularly deadly when the degree is a medical degree, authorizing someone to treat sick people or perform surgery on children. For years, Dr. Patrick Chavis was held up as a shining example of the success of affirmative action, for he was admitted to medical school as a result of minority preferences and went back to the black community to practice medicine. In fact, he was publicly praised by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights just 2 weeks before his license was suspended after his patients died under conditions that brought the matter to the attention of the Medical Board of California.
What? Yo, this is crazy. And I mean, that's a really good, I didn't even think about that. That's a really good point. That, like, you know, if you give people these degrees, they're not as competent as they should be if you're, you know, grading based on affirmative action. And so that can cause real world harm. I didn't even think about this.
An administrative law judge referred to Chavis's inability to perform some of the most basic duties required of a physician. A year later, after a fuller investigation, his license was revoked. Those who had for years been using Chavis as a shining example of the success of affirmative action suddenly changed tactics and claimed that an isolated example of failure proved nothing. Sadly, Chavis was not an isolated example. When a professor at the Harvard Medical School declared publicly, back in the 1970s, that black students were being allowed to graduate from that institution without meeting the same standards as others, he was denounced as a racist for saying that it was cruel to allow trusting patients to pay for our irresponsibility. Trusting black patients, in many cases. Why do supposedly responsible people create such dangerous double standards?
Well, I think that they don't understand the consequences of these actions, though. Like, and we see this a lot today in how people parent. It's like, oh, well, the kid wants what they want, right? The boy wants to put on the dress, or the kid wants to eat candy all day. Just give the kid whatever the kid wants, right? I'm being, you know, altruistic to the max, right? I'm being incredibly generous, incredibly loving. giving people whatever is nice, but giving people whatever they want. But the problem is just because you give people what they want, or you do something that on the outset looks kind and nice and loving, doesn't mean that it is kind and nice and loving, and it doesn't mean that it's actually the right thing to do. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper and not just take everything at face value. You have to think about, well, hold on, what are the consequences of me blurring the lines of male and female with my child? What are the consequences of giving my child just as much candy as the little one desires, right? And also here, what are the consequences of just giving away degrees willy-nilly to random black people if they haven't gained the necessary knowledge and understanding of the curriculum in order to actually have the proficiency that the degree that they've accrued professes. So, it's a little bit more than just, oh, what does little Johnny want? Oh, what makes our stats look good when people look at the percentage of black people who have graduated from Harvard? It's a little bit more than that. You can't just take everything at an extremely surface level, examination and then just call it a day.
Some imagine that they are being friends to blacks by lowering the standards for them. Some don't think that blacks have what it takes to meet real standards, and that colleges and universities will lose their diversity.
Now that is known as the soft bigotry of low expectations. When you say, "Oh, black people can't do this," what? You think black people know how to register to vote? Come on, really? That's the kind of mindset that perpetrates, these types of arguments.
And perhaps federal money with it, if they don't lower the standards in order to get an acceptable racial body count. My own experience as a teacher was that black students would meet higher standards if you refused to lower the standards for them. This was not the royal road to popularity, either with the students themselves or with the friends of blacks on the faculty and in the administration. But when the dust finally settled, the students met the standards.
Mm-hmm.
We have gotten so used to abysmal performances from black students, beginning and failing ghetto schools, that it is hard for some to believe that black students once did a lot better than they do today, at least in places and times with good schools. As far back as the First World War, black soldiers from New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Ohio scored higher on mental tests than white soldiers from Georgia, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Mississippi. During the 1940s, black students in Harlem schools had test scores very similar to those of white working-class students on the Lower East Side of New York. Sometimes the Harlem scores were a little higher or a little lower, but they were never miles behind, the way they are today in many ghetto schools. If blacks could do better back when their opportunities were...
I do wish it said where the data came from, but this is certainly interesting.
Worse, why can't today's ghetto students do better? Perhaps blacks have too many friends today.
I kind of get that, but I also do think that the quality of schools in these areas is a big issue as well, because the overall quality of schools in general is just on a precipitous decline. So, I do think that's certainly part of it. But, Thomas Sowell makes a good point. If you lower the standards, people will lower their behavior to meet those standards, even if they're capable of doing much more. So, great point. Agree with us. We're black people.